Yay! Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Saturn Returns Diary podcast. This is super exciting because this is going to be on YouTube, which is a whole new experience for me. Well, not for me personally, but for the podcast, which is super exciting. So, we have our first guest here today, which is Juliana. And yeah, I'm just like really excited for you guys to listen to this, and also selfishly, I'm very excited to listen to this because, as we know, I'm also going through my Saturn return and I'm like, what is going on? So let's hear from the experts who have already been through it. That's the goal of this. So, yeah, we're going to kind of like flow with this. But, Juliana, do you want to give us a little bit of a rundown of who you are, how you maybe explain yourself in the state that you're in now? So we can get to know you a little better.
Thanks, Court. I'm so excited to be here today. Who am I? Well, I've decided that I really like starting with just who I see myself as a human instead of work, because we're always describing ourselves by what we do as work. And I like to think of myself as just this really big-hearted, grounded, earth-loving human who believes in magic, basically.
Oh, mic drop. That is you.
And what I do for work, for money, is I'm a counselor, a therapeutic counselor who I work primarily as a spiritual counselor. And I support empaths and sensitives to integrate the mind, body, and spirit connection. I really believe that those three are so imperative for us to be whole human beings. And I've just also I've become a reader of the Akashic Records. So I've been going into the Akashic Records, which has been a whole new kind of way of looking at myself and the world and other people. It's just quite, I feel super, super honored to have been invited into the Akasha. So that's a new thing I'm doing these days.
It's really cool. Like, I just had that experience with you not long ago, and I'm never speechless. And I was like so speechless. I was like, I couldn't speak. Like, I don't know. It was so cool. So 10 out of 10 recommend.
Thank you.
Well, I think you summarized like how I see you so well. And just for context, so people know, Juliana and I have never met in real life, but we have met online. And I think it was like midway through 2020, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Through the 5D collective. I think at the time it was EHF, and that is where we met. So we've kind of got to know each other through such a transitional year, which is really a blessing. But yeah, so now we're here, which is so cool. Shall we talk about what your sun, moon, rising is?
Totally. So I am a Scorpio sun, Gemini moon, and Libra rising.
The juiciness. So obviously this podcast is about astrology. So that's like how we profile people around here, which is really great. And for those of you who aren't aware, I just kind of feel like I want to bring this in, but Scorpio is actually something that I don't know if people know this. I don't know if you know this, Juliana, but Scorpio has a lot to do with psychology. So, and then Libra is about relationships, Gemini is about communication. So even everything that you just shared with us really kind of represents those three pillars. So
that's cool. I love that. I didn't know that about those three. That's really neat. I love that.
Astrology does not lie. So that's why we're doing this. So yeah, you shared a little bit about yourself. We did your SMR, which is Sun, Moon, Rising. I would love to know what parts of your sign, Scorpio, or signs, do you feel like you resonate the most with?
Well, it's been interesting because when I first started exploring, like my mom is really into astrology, and so she introduced it to me at a really young age. And it was interesting because there are those very typical parts of Scorpio that I never resonated with, like being like whenever people would find out I'm a Scorpio, they're like, ooh, I'll be afraid of you. And I was like, but I'm actually really nice. Like I'm actually a pretty nice person. So
Yeah.
it never really clicked for me. But as I started diving into what Scorpio means as I started getting older, what I really resonated about the Scorpio is like the darkness and the depth. It's like, give me deep conversations and I could talk about it all day long. And this willingness to go like really deep. And I think this is right. Like Scorpio has different, like it has the scorpion and then the eagle and then the phoenix. Does it sometimes have those three signs?
Yeah. I would also even add the snake. Sometimes that comes in with that as well.
Yes. And I really resonated with that, like feeling like sometimes like I'm just going through these crazy sheddings, like the snake, or that I'm stinging myself, like the
Mhm.
scorpion, where I like really put myself into these crazy positions that I don't know how I get myself into. And then like kind of seeing the big picture, like the eagle, and then feeling like I'm reborn. Like it's like I feel like my life has been this death and rebirth throughout pretty much my whole life. So that's what I really resonate with Scorpio. And then with the Libra aspect is that I'm like, I just want people to get along.
Mhm.
It's like, I just want balance and peace and people to get along. That was really, really huge for me growing up. And then it still is. I like people to get along and I like balance and harmony. And then Gemini, I was actually just telling my partner this the other day. I was like, Gemini, he said something to me that what I said was so Gemini of me. And I was like, I didn't understand it. My mom's a Gemini. I have lots of friends who are Geminis and it's kind of felt like more difficult for me to understand my Gemini moon.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Ooh, that's really interesting that you actually brought that up because what we're gonna talk about, and I know in our you were like, I don't know what a progressed moon is. And I do talk about it a little bit in a previous episode on the podcast, but we're going to talk about this a little bit because there's a moment before your Saturn return, not a moment, actually 2.5 years, where you have a progressed moon return. And that's where your moon in Gemini would return back to the same spot it was when you were born, um, but a progressed moon. It's a little bit hard to explain, but I'll kind of dive into that a little bit more and just ask you, like, almost like the energetics around that time of your life, just to kind of bring it up. So it's so interesting that you're like, I don't know. But I love all of those. I think you like, yeah, the mediation, the like fairness, equality, balance, but also this like willingness to rise and like want people to like go to the depths and like, talk about things and bring it up. Like that's beautiful. Love all that. Um, do you feel, can you share? You said your partner. What's your partner's sign?
He is he's Taurus sun, which is really interesting because both of my brothers are Taurus suns and they were both born on May the 8th and he's also born on May the 8th. So I'm like surrounded by May the 8th people.
Wow.
Lots of learning there. So he's Taurus sun, Scorpio rising, and Aries moon.
Ooh, that's so cool. I mean, compatibility is like a whole other thing, but I that 888 is so fascinating because 8 is like a Scorpio number,
Mm.
ruled by the eighth house. So that's like, whoa. I
Mhm.
love that.
Mhm.
All right, let's kind of go down here a little bit. So now we're going to kind of get into some of the juicy parts. That's why we're all here. We want to know what people go through during their Saturn return. So before we actually like talk about the logistics of your Saturn, I know I've talked to you about, I gave you some of the questions, but if you could summarize or put into a phrase or something how that time in your life from the ages of 27 to 31 was, how would you describe it?
Um, I made notes like of everything that happened because I was like, and then I looked at it, I'm like, oh my goodness, so much happened. Roller coaster or like trudging through mud.
Mm.
And more like in the roller coaster, I was more like doing this, like
Mm.
going down the whole
Like the
time.
drops.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That is like a very good way to describe how I currently have been feeling as well, like through the past few years. And I think this is something that a lot of people get a little bit scared of because they hear this and then they think, oh my God, like it's going to be so hard. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is because I think it's important to put a pin in the fact that you just said, that's the feeling of this, because that's what Saturn does. But also, now we're going to learn, okay, what were you learning? Like, what were the challenges here, and how has that helped you get to where you are? Because you're still here, you're alive, and you made it through. So that's sort of what I want to like say to people listening to this, because I know a lot of people get scared. So roller coaster, sledging through mud. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know, I know because I have your chart, but do you know what sign your Saturn is in?
It's in Libra, I believe.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And do you know what house it's in?
First house.
Yes, look at you go. I love this. Um, so for those of us who aren't really familiar with astrology, I'll give a little bit of a rundown just kind of on what Juliana just described. So Saturn being in the first house can make things feel very heavy because Saturn is typically a sign that has to do with challenge, upheaval, it's push, it's hard work, it's ruled by Capricorn. So it kind of is like this planet, right? It's that father kind of figure. And in the first house, it has a lot to do with our identity of self. And, it can be about our body, it can be about first house just has a lot to do with like what's going on here, what we can see, what we can actually like identify as. And to have it in Libra, there's an energy here of like duality, and also relationships. So Juliana has Saturn in her first house in Libra, but it's also conjunct Pluto, which is ruled by Scorpio, and also Jupiter. So she has the planetary action that we all faced during 2020, which is so incredible. But I guess knowing that we have that information, and I know that's probably a lot for people to digest. But now what I would kind of ask you is, can you just like tell us a little bit about that time in your life with that Saturn return and what was going on? So then we have context to come back to.
Mm-hmm. So what I was doing at the beginning of my Saturn return is I was working in forestry. So I would come back from traveling and I was like, I need to have a career. I need a job. And had graduated college and I was working in forestry and living in Victoria. And I'm just looking down at my notes. I was not happy.
Mm.
I loved being in the forest, but I didn't like the whole industry of forestry and how I had to work. And I started becoming my anxiety was really high. My brain was nonstop turning about all of my shoulds. Like it was just should. And everything was super, super confusing. And it was interesting because through my Saturn return, I had 4 people very close to me die. And right at the end of my Saturn return, 3 people died within 2 months of each other. And so at the beginning of my Saturn return, my Oma passed away, I was super close to. And it was also my last time that I went to Holland. My dad is Dutch, so I spent a lot of time in Holland. And that was really, really hard. It's also the same time that I discovered yoga. And like I started with Bikram yoga. And for those of you who know Bikram yoga, hot yoga, it can be really intense. And I was like intensely into it. I was practicing like 7 days a week, most weeks. And I loved it because for the first time in my life, my mind started calming down. It was like there was all I could focus on was the heat and breathing and moving my body. And so my anxiety actually at that time started kind of diminishing a little bit.
Mm.
So that's what I mean when I say like roller coaster, because there were these like new discoveries throughout my Saturn return where like things felt super, super hard, but there were these new things that I was discovering about myself. And so I was working in forestry. I transitioned to geographic information systems, which is map making. Because I was still trying to fit into this box of what I thought life should look like. Like I should have a career with benefits and CPP and all of that stuff. So I was doing that, and I was really unhappy in GIS as well. I was miserable, and I actually got laid off. So I think I was 30, 29, 30, and I got,
Yeah, I was gonna say, how old were you then?
yeah, 29, 29.
Mm.
And I got laid off, and I ended up going on EI. And on EI, it was actually really beautiful because I was really spending more time diving into yoga. And at this point, I was kind of frustrated with Bikram yoga. I had a longing for more. It was like something's missing in this. And I discovered my yoga teachers, my Ashtanga yoga teachers, Harmony Slater and Jeff Lichty. And I started diving into, I did a yoga education program with them and started diving into the Yoga Sutras, pranayama, breathing, meditation. And I remember one day I'd been doing pranayama for like 2 weeks, and I came to the studio and it was like 5 a.m. starts. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and get at the studio at 5 a.m. And it was like, I said to my teacher, Harmony, I said, I feel different. And she looked at me and she was like, you look different. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she said, well, your eyes, they're clearer. And I remember this really like this potent energy of being like, oh, there's more. Like there's more to life than this like Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, hustle, get married, have kids, there's more. And so I did that, and I started teaching yoga a little bit on the side. And then my boyfriend at the time and I broke up with him after 5 years.
Wow.
And so we broke up, which was, I mean, I love really big. Like when I love someone, it's a big letting go process after a relationship for me. And so that was 5 years. It was a big letting go. A month later, I was living in this basement suite of this house, and the woman who owned the house, her name was Sue, and she knew me since I was 3 years old, and she had a rare form of cancer, and a month later, she died. Upstairs, and I felt very responsible because in some ways I helped her out a lot. And then a month later my grandfather died suddenly, and it was just like I felt like I'd been run over by a truck. And what's really interesting, at that same time, my mom, so she was 55, I think. I asked her the other day, she was 54. It was her friend, her father, and she also she didn't lose her job, but stuff happened at her job of 30 years where she had to leave it. So we were going through these things at the same time. And I ended up moving home. My dad came over one day and he looked at my kitchen and I love to cook, and I always keep a clean kitchen. And he came in to bring me some like kale from the root cellar. And he's like, what is going on? And he kind of said, you need to come home. Just come home.
Mm.
And so my mom and I are transitioning through this like grieving process together. My poor dad, like,
Oh my gosh.
my poor dad. And then I ended up going back to waitress, or no, went back into food and beverage. I was working in food and beverage when I was in 18, 19, 20 through my 20s. And I ended up going back into food and beverage, first at a bakery and then waitressing. So it was like I was kind of going back to my 20s again after all of this. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, I actually want to interject just a minute. This is like it's just so, first of all of this is so incredible to hear, because I think you kind of like hit the nail on the head with a few things. First, you talked about how like the shoulding is almost like Saturn is like shedding the shoulds, because what Saturn's job is to do is to realign you on your path, right? So like everything that we should be doing is a condition in a structure that we've been told. And on one hand, that's great because we know that we need structure. Hey, I'm learning this. But we know we need it, but we need it to align with our soul. And that's what Saturn teaches us, but it teaches us in a way that's challenging. It's not what we're used to. So it's shedding those shoulds and finding what we want for ourselves. So I love that you brought that up. The other thing that I actually found really interesting as you're sharing this is knowing that you have Saturn in Libra, and there was so much happening in regards to relationships, which is like, whoa, like there's so much there. And the fact that it's conjunct Pluto, which is about death and rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Wow.
like, so and then you also said just before you continue, you also said about how you went back to the things almost like in your early 20s. And what I kind of find interesting is like when we're growing, right? Or like when we're changing and we're leaving our comfort zone, the way that and you would know, so like you probably have so much advice on this, but like it's like our protection is like I need to go back to like what I know and is comfortable. So like which way can I do that to help myself through it? And I'm sure there's some form of like that being beneficial at times. I don't know the psychology behind that. But I just find that so interesting because that's like so many life changes. And then yeah, so yeah, please keep going if there's anything you want to go off of that.
Yeah, it was really interesting because what I knew that I didn't want is I didn't want to work a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job because that felt really stifling to me.
Mhm.
And so kind of I got the job back waitressing. It was so hard at that time to find a waitressing job in Victoria, and my brother was working for a restaurant. And he ended up helping me get the job at the same restaurant. So
Mm.
we were now working together again, and we hadn't been close since we were younger, like in elementary school. So there's another relationship piece, like that relationship started building between the two of us as adults. And what I liked about the waitressing was that I was more free to then like practice yoga whenever I wanted to. I was meeting people, like I felt very social again, which I hadn't felt in my years in forestry. I was very like, my friend group was very small and it was very limited. And in waitressing, I was really enjoying that like social aspect again, which
Okay.
is again the Libra.
Yes. And also because you have all of this happening in your first house, it's it's interesting because the first house is about identity, right? So like you're coming out as this like new person essentially in this situation. But before that, it's 12th house stuff. So you would have been going through quite a few 12th house transits, which essentially kind of like are about healing and being secluded and sort of like being in your own space so that you prepare for what's next. So before you go on, like what was the years, like how old were you during your like forestry when you were kind of like more on your own, you would say?
20, I would say like 27, 26, 27.
Okay.
And then 28 was when everything started shifting.
Okay, so okay, this is where I want to put in the progressed moon.
Mm-hmm.
So this is exactly something that I'm learning more about, and I don't have enough knowledge to teach on it. So I'm just learning about this as well. But basically, the progressed moon is like that phase right before your Saturn return where everything starts to shift, and it almost prepares you for your Saturn return. So your progressed moon, I looked this up in your chart before, and your progressed moon was obviously in the sign of Gemini because you have a moon in Gemini, but it was transiting the eighth house. So you were having this, and that happens at like 27, 28. It's a 2.5 year transit as well. So probably would have started at 26. But basically, with that being said, it's like this energy of Gemini being your moon in the eighth house, some sort of like learning around whether it be like shadow stuff, like new things coming up, like things coming. Eighth house is about like really digging up all that stuff that we haven't seen, right? So it can be very transformational, and it can also feel heavy in there. But with the Gemini, it's almost like you were being asked to learn something new. So I don't know how that exactly fits in, but clearly it was like, okay, we're going to break away and make for this new path forward.
I love that because that's actually when I discovered my yoga and started diving into yoga, where the world, like my mind started calming down for the first time since I was a teenager, and then meeting my teachers and diving into yoga education and philosophy and stuff.
Okay, boom. And Gemini is the mind. Eighth house is like that deep rooted, like energy, right? Like everything that's underneath. So you literally combined the both, and that made room for this path forward. Okay, so cool. So would you say that you had yoga? Yoga was that like an anchor that helped you throughout that time? Yeah.
Totally through like the deaths, through my breakup, through even the roller coaster when I started working at the restaurants again. Like that was a roller coaster. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But it was like yoga was my constant. Yoga was the only thing that was constant in my life through finding new places to live, different all of the stuff that was coming up with my mom as we were both moving through this grieving process together. Everything, it was like yoga was my constant, the one place I could go to. Mm-hmm.
That's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like, knowing that and hearing you say that, it's like being on a roller coaster, having something that like that's like a comfort, that's like a safety to help you through your transition, which I think yoga is such a beautiful one. But yeah, maybe just something for people to keep in mind, like if you're going through it right now too, to have something or find something that you feel really good about. But yeah, I would love to hear more. Yeah, if you want to keep going, where did we leave off? You're back home at the restaurant.
I was waitressing, and it was the year I was 30. So the year I turned 31, but I was still 30 in that summer. So this is where I did regress to being like a 20-year-old again. I declared that the summer of Jules, and my friends call me Jules. So I was like, it's the summer of Jules. I was waitressing. I had lots of friends. I had a really big social life. And I started partying like I hadn't partied since I was like 19, 20 and living in a resort in the Rocky Mountains. And yeah, it was fun. I had fun. I also made some really bad choices and decisions, which I feel like I have some really protective guides that were kind of looking out for me. It was kind of like a rock bottom, I would say, some of that summer, where I was making choices that I had made when I was 20 that I didn't want to make again. Um, and so it was like, it was really fun, but it was also very humbling and eye-opening to be like, ooh, what is actually happening? Like, what am I actually doing here? Um, yeah. And then as I was doing that, I think realizing that, what am I doing? I started trying to force myself into a box again.
Mhm.
And I got a job at a holistic college in Victoria, where I thought, oh, I can do administrative work. That's a grown-up job. But I'm at a holistic college, and so it'll be, it's more in alignment with me. And I was miserable, like miserable, stuck behind this desk again.
Do you think that that was like, I don't know, I know you and I know this but like a bridge job, Lacey Phillips talks about this for those of you who don't know, but do you think that was like a bridge into something?
Um, well, possibly. I actually don't know about that. Like I was, when I was writing all of this down the other morning, I was like, it actually felt like I was trying to force myself into that old structure again, those old programmings of
Okay.
who I needed to be. And it was like, okay, look at me acting like a 20-year-old and making really stupid choices again. I need to be an adult and do what I should do. It was like the last bit of the shoulds. I also was
Mhm.
like taking on people's, I had multiple people during this time try to hire me as like to work separately for their new businesses. And I took a couple of these on and was like, yeah, I'll embody your whole business without getting paid and do all of this because I thought I should. And that was the right decisions. I was putting on other people's perceptions of me, which was a really, really hard lesson. So I was like waitressing, I was working at this college, I was taking on other people's, this other work I was doing that I wasn't getting paid for. And then I was teaching yoga and practicing yoga, like all of that at the same time, and partying.
That's a full plate. And,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of identities.
Yeah.
Lots of stuff as that first house transit. It's like, okay, well, what identity do I want here? Like, who am I? Would you say
Mhm.
that was kind of what you were experiencing?
Totally. It was like, who am I? How do I fit into this world? What am I doing? And lots of beautiful lessons in this time in hindsight. But at that moment, it was just like yoga was the only thing that made sense. I remember in the middle of this time, I was, I would go and practice yoga on my break if I worked a split shift because I was teaching. I would just let myself in, and I would ride my bike down from the restaurant and go into the yoga studio and practice. And one day I was coming out and I was talking to a friend of mine, and my bike was parked down on it's right outside of Market Square in Victoria. And I watched a truck back up and bend my bike. And I was talking to my friend at the time, and I was like, I think that's a sign that I need to slow down, that the universe is saying enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I can never, like, that's so clear to me. My blue bike, like, it was just like bent.
Wow.
Couldn't ride my bike quickly back to work, had to walk slowly back to work. Um,
And so yet another way that the universe that guides all the things and the way that like our plan works, like Saturn being like, look, nah. This like
totally,
yeah.
totally. And
Mm.
so at the end of this, so this work I was doing with this woman who was trying to start her own business, and I was going along with it and not making any money out of it. I knew deep down inside it wasn't what I wanted to do, but the shoulds were so loud that I was doing it anyhow. And then she actually ended the partnership, and I had a major breakdown. I got so drunk. My brother, who I worked with, had to come and pick me up downtown. It was daytime, like major, like rock bottom.
Mm.
um I was so, like, it was just, I was so devastated because it was just like, here I am again doing what I think the outside world wants me to do. Here I am again doing what I should do, and it's not working. And it was devastating. And I woke up the next morning. This was the beauty of it. I woke up the next morning and I had a remembering, and it was like, oh yeah, when I was 15, 16 years old, which was the height of my depression as a teenager, I wanted to be a counselor. And so now that's where I am today. Mhm.
Wow. That
Mhm.
is so beautiful. And I mean, I'm sure there's things that, well, through obviously having that breakdown, but I'm sure there was things along the way that were kind of coming up, but maybe you couldn't see. That is so beautiful. Like it's so beautiful to hear now. I'm sure not when you were in it, but your Saturn also squares your MC, which the MC is like our legacy line, or like how, our purpose in this world. And yours is in Cancer, which is that nurturer, right? Like someone who takes care of, and emotions and feelings, and that like psychic or intuitive insight. It's very motherly. But to have a square between the two, there's this like tension. They don't fully understand or get along with one another. But the goal of that is like, one of the things I love about squares are it's a call to action. So all that stuff that your Saturn was going through was like, boom, like we need to get her to realize her purpose, her legacy here, which is that MC line.
Mm. Mhm.
So you
There
did,
was definitely that tension.
yeah, like tension was there. I feel it, felt it. I'm just trying to like just like everyone just like soak that in wherever you are listening to this, because like I'm excited to hear where how you kind of feel now, but so with all of that, what do you think the biggest structural change was in your life at that? Like it obviously every structure that you had rock bottomed out, it sounds like. Um, but what do you think
Mhm.
the biggest one was?
I think it was the letting go of that structure of what a job needs to look like, and who or what type of work a 30, 31-year-old should be doing. Yeah. It's like what we should be doing because we're at a certain age, and that's what society has told us is what we have to do.
Okay, like literally this, me, and everyone who listens to this and follows me, they know me too, but this is huge. Like this is so big, like that statement of like what a 31 to 32-year-old, 33, whatever age you're at, where you think you should be doing something that doesn't align. Like why do we do that, So I just like really appreciate you saying that and sharing it, because I think there's a lot of people that
Mhm.
feel that too.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. Um, so I guess like I'm not sure if you want to say anything else in regards to that. Like, so you had this realization of being a counselor, and then what kind of happened after that? When did you switch and change into, pursuing that? Did it come right away or?
It's so magical. Like, this is what I love about the universe and spirit and everything. And when you're in alignment with choices, because I had this realization, I want to be a counselor. And then I had this back and forth in my head. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? What kind of school am I going to go to? And I thought about going to Thompson Rivers in Kamloops because my best friend lived there with her 3 kids. And I'm like, oh, I can go live with Kelly and be there. And then I'm like, I've lived in Kamloops. I hate Kamloops. I don't want to live in Kamloops. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I don't really want to stay in Victoria. I don't really know. And then, so I'm still practicing yoga at Ashtanga Yoga Victoria. I'm still waitressing. I gave up the holistic college job, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to waitress because this is what feels good to me. It feels good to be able to go in and make the money that I would make at an 8-hour job in 4 hours, like, and I can get the social aspect. So I started listening to like, okay, what feels good? What feels good? And then I was living in this cute little basement suite right in Fairfield, a 5-minute walk to the beach. Like, it was so perfect living there. The landlord was a single mom. She was amazing and kind. I got my cat. I always wanted a cat. I got my own cat. Like, I started for the first time in my life having something other than me to be responsible for. And then I was on Facebook one day, good old Facebook, and I'm scrolling through and I'm friends with a girl who I didn't know very well at my yoga studio. And I see her, this picture of her with 3 people, and I don't know the people. And she says, like, best 2 weeks of our lives, right? Something like that. And she tags this college, Clear Mind International. And I was like, what's that? And I clicked it and I'm like, oh, they do counselor training. Oh, what's that? I reached Teresa and we had coffee. She told me about Clear Mind. I talked to this beautiful woman named Nazreen, who introduced me to their very first workshop. That's kind of like, it was a prerequisite to their practitioners training program. And it's also just an amazing workshop. And I was a month later in Langley at a retreat center doing this workshop, and then signed up for the practitioners training program and in training that year.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's so wild.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know what's interesting? Like, this place is called Clear Mind, obviously, but like, you kind of had to clear your mind in order to have like all that come through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So that basically, would you say, is this like true, that that kind of just like all of that breaking down sort of created the new structure for your life in the following years, like a whole new decade, sort of speak, or not decade, but
Yeah, it did. Like, it well it what it did is, for me, it felt like it really cleared out enough of the gunk so that I could actually be like, okay, what do I want? And to be able to listen to myself. Um, Going through the 3 years at Clear Mind was a whole other big journey that was incredible, that I like supported me to be even more who I am now. But I needed to like be okay with doing things different. I needed to find that, like, oh, I don't have to do what everyone else is doing. Oh, I get to choose what I actually want. Oh, I don't have to have a job like everyone else has. Oh, I can be a waitress and be happy when I'm 31, 32 years old. That's okay. And that supports my lifestyle and my life. Like, that's where I needed to get to even remember that I actually really wanted to be a counselor when I was 15. Like, who wants to be a counselor when they're 15? First of all, it was just like, wanted to be a counselor at that age. I needed to have all of that, like, shedding of all of that programming that I had picked up on through my teen years and 20s about what an adult should be doing, what an adult life should look like. Mm-hmm.
Oh, Saturn Returns. This is like such a good, like, oh, it's just such a beautiful representation of what this time in life is about. And I love that I know this is very like a short time, but got to kind of hear like the expansion and growth in all of that too. And um, yeah, it's just so like mind blowing, really. I don't know. I'm still shocked by it because, it's just beautiful. But anyway, thank you for sharing all of that.
Mhm.
Um, so how do you think that impacted where you are now? I know we kind of talked about this a little bit, but um, yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Um, well, I that probably has to do with my Saturn and Jupiter and Pluto in the first house. Um, but I still struggle with, struggle's the wrong word, but I still have to be cognizant of releasing structural programming that I don't actually want to live in. Like it is an active practice that I have. Like even had to do that as a counselor. I had to be like, I actually love working with that integration of the mind, body, and spirit. And I want to call myself a spiritual counselor. And I had to let go of so many beliefs of what a counselor should do, how a counselor should look,
Mhm.
how they should speak, like all of that. It's like I had to, it's like my Saturn return um was an introduction to my own personal releasing of the structures that don't suit me, that I actually don't want to take on, because some structures are good, as you said, right? Like, but I actually get to create the structures and choose the structures that I want to live in.
Yeah. Wow. For yourself and the ones that, you, yeah, the ones that benefit you in your life. And I
Mhm.
think that's so cool because that's like the doorway or portal, I guess, with Saturn. It's like opens a doorway to creating new structures that work for you and your soul. But why it's so challenging is because like Saturn just keeps knocking until you get it. So it's like that repetitive pattern. And I think the fact that you have this, like you said, in the first house, but also squaring your MC in Cancer, it is a lot to do with your career. And it is a lot to do with like how you're perceived in the world and kind of like, I guess, what you do in regards to your purpose. So yeah, wow, that's so incredible. um I would like to just say, what advice would you have given to yourself? Like if you could look back now, and look back at that Juliana who was then 27 to 31, or even after, what would you say?
Be gentle, be kind. Like you're doing such good work. Like it's not easy. Be gentle and be kind to yourself.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's another really good one. Like that makes me emotional because obviously it's like, I'm in this portal as well. I'm 30, and through messages that I receive on Instagram and people who are around the same age group, like, what is going on? Like, why do I feel like this? And so to hear your story and to hear like, be gentle, be kind. Um, I mean, I'm sure that's nourishing for yourself, but also for so many others too. Yeah.
Yeah, like I got emotional there when I said those words too. And I just like what I see in my work too. It's just we're all so hard on ourselves. Like we're
Mm,
all so hard. Most of us would never speak to our best friends or our children or our nieces and nephews the way that we talk to ourselves.
mm,
And so it's like if we can just do one thing and be like, would I talk to my best friend the way that I'm talking to myself right now? Probably not.
yeah.
Okay, can I talk to myself a little bit differently?
Yeah.
Makes a huge difference. We're so hard on ourselves.
Mm. Oh yeah, 100%. I very much agree with that statement. That kind of like leads me into my other question I was going to ask before we kind of wrap things up. But I guess it might be similar to what you just said, but what would you say to someone else who's going through this?
Mm. Be gentle,
Yeah.
but like, it's going, like, it's gonna end.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a, when we're in those places of depth and what feels like despair and struggle, it really does feel like it's never going to end. Like, it really is just like this, what is going on and how can I make it end? And this is something that that I really, actually embody in my own personal life. But I think the more we can surrender into the struggle, actually, the faster the struggle, unravels and
Ooh,
releases. 'Cause
yeah.
it's like the more we fight against something that is coming, and so it's like, if you want to cry, cry. If you want to have a day where you're, like I shared with Court, before the podcast started, I felt like a 4-year-old yesterday. Like, allow yourself to feel those emotions, because those human emotions are so valid and important, because I really see all of these emotions and all of the struggles that we go through as humans as these, new entry points. Like, if we can allow ourselves to sink into them, they're a portal into a new way, and they're clues for us to follow. Like, if we're having big emotions, there's something to be recognized and noticed there. We don't necessarily need to know what that thing is or what it means, but if we honor it, more can open to us.
Mm.
Mhm.
Mic drop. That was so good. You're right. It's again a portal. Like you got to feel to get through it, right? Like I almost think of that there's like this kids book I think or like kid song. It's like you can't go under it, can't go over it. You got to go through it or something. I probably butchered that. but but it's like the whole like like I'm pretty sure they're going on a bear hunt. That's what it's from. But they're like you got to go through it, right? And the only way through is to actually like go through it. So
Mhm.
I mean, I've said to my mom countless times, I'm like, I just want to be 33. Like, I just want to be 33. And I think I said that years ago, but I also know that that's when things kind of get to the other side. And she's like, you can't just skip. Like, there's beauty in this part. So, where are you at right now in your life? And I know you shared that you had a moment yesterday, which is totally cool. But, like, where are you at in your life right now? Um, that maybe like there's something that you want to share that kind of I don't know, that just maybe feels good or juicy or that you just want to show people the other side.
Mm. I When I went to that 3-day workshop with Clear Minds, um, I met a friend there. And she is my mom's age. I think she's a year younger than my mom, and she's still a very good friend. And she would say to me, Jules, like, your early 30s are for this sort of thing, and your late 30s, this is what happens, in your 40s, this is what happens. And I would kind of internally be like, yeah, right. Yeah, right. And I'm turning 40 in November. And it's true. Things, like, you start to feel different. Like, how I felt when I was 20 to how I felt when I was 30 to now how I feel when I'm 39. Like, I kind of feel like, um, I have the world at my fingertips. It's like, ooh, look at, like, life feels really potent and delicious right now. It has its hard days. Believe, like, it still is a human existence
Yeah.
that we're living, but it's like, ooh, like, I feel more comfortable in my body, that I've ever felt in my entire life. I understand my own inner emotions and workings and can communicate them to people better than I ever have. My connection with spirit has increased exponentially. Like, yeah, that friend of mine, Sam is her name. I kind of like didn't really believe her. And now that she says something about her 50s and 60s, I kind of go, okay. Because I think she's onto something, and it must have something to do with the astrology as well, right? And so it's just like, I don't know, life's gotten better. Like life has only ever gotten better for me as I've gone along. The more that I surrendered into what my heart was calling for and what my intuition was calling for, the more I let go of the shoulds and did what my heart really wanted to do, the easier life has become. And it's a practice,
Mm,
following the heart and the intuition, but I've gathered enough evidence now over the years that it's like, oh yeah, okay, there's
mm.
something to this. Mm-hmm.
Gathering the evidence. There you go. I feel like all of that is such a great way to kind of like wrap up your little bit of this story of like what you experience. And I love that you kind of like brought in that age thing because yeah, I think a lot of people fear getting older, but really it's like it's kind of beautiful, you know, like there's processes, of course, like you said, but yeah, it makes me hopeful. So thank you for sharing that. All right. I think that is where I want to leave it off. And for those of you who, you know, are obviously listening, Juliana has some amazing offers as well. If you ever want to work with her, this part of this podcast is I wanted it to be different because I like being different. And so obviously we didn't really talk much about like the offers that she has because I want it to be primarily people's stories because everyone has a story and everyone's story deserves to be told, right? Like this is how we get to where we're going. But there are people who I'm going to have on who have such incredible things to share. So, I guess with that being said, is there anywhere that you are that maybe people can find you if they wanted to connect more?
Yeah, thanks, Court. I love what you said there, just about people's stories, because I think that's what I love so much about counseling is hearing people's stories and where they come from and what makes them, right? Like it's like one of the things that I say to all of my clients is my sole intention is to understand people's perspective on the world, because we all have a different perspective based on our families, the countries we were raised in, our spiritual beliefs, all of our experiences, and also astrology, right? Like it's like, and so I just want to know, like, what is life like for them? And so that being said, best place to find me right now, where I'm most active, is on my website, and it's Inner Wisdom Wellness. It's inner-wisdom.ca. And I do a weekly newsletter where I send out card pulls from the Gene Keys,
They're my
which are
favorite.
really,
I
I
love
love that you
so
love
much. I'm
them.
always like, woo!
Oh, awesome. That makes me so happy. So all of my offerings are in there, and you can sign up for my newsletter on there. I have an intention of I've started the YouTube channel. I just haven't posted anything yet. So that'll be on my website at some point around some of the messages that I receive in the Akasha that actually really want to be told. So I'm going to be doing that. And I'm kind of on Instagram. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship on Instagram, but you can find me there at inner.wisdom.wellness on Instagram,
Mm.
or just search my name.
Yeah, I'll definitely put it everything in the description below. But I just want to also just kind of like give you a little something here because you just said, you know, you have a love-hate relationship with Instagram, and perhaps this is the shooting of the
Ah.
systems, you know? So just putting that out.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. See, it's a constant learning. It's like a constant letting go of the shoulds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
And it's a system, right? Like I could talk about systems for days, and I do, but like it's again, I just want to like end off this podcast episode being like, what I feel like I'm taking away from your story and just you sharing is like, you know, following your heart, following your own intuition, and clearing the slate during your Saturn return to almost listen into what you actually want for yourself. And maybe it's like having to do with something that when you were a child. You never know.
Mhm.
All right, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Juliana. This has been so awesome. I'm so excited for people to hear this. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, you can always reach out to me on Instagram at Saturn Return Diaries, or you can comment below because this is going to be on YouTube, which is super fun. And yeah, like, subscribe, do all the things, and I will see you guys in our next episode.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.